Yeah, so, we've talked about transgender porn in the past. When I look into it, I kind of go in chunks because it's kind of exhausting. And I always think I'm going to hit the bottom, like uh, a place where it can't go anymore, a kind of like end to it or something, but I never do. It just seems to keep going and going. And Uh, like I was saying, it's even hard for me to kind of talk about a little bit, which is the racism and the transgender porn, because first of all, there are these hashtags on Twitter where there's like all this porn. Um, I don't think most people know just how much porn is on Twitter. It's if you know the right hashtags to look for, you can just immediately, and there's no filter either. It will just come up, like uh, in your face. So one of these accounts I was looking at, a sissy account again. This is the sissy associated with the forced feminization pornography, which is associated with transgenderism and transgender pornography. So there was this account that was posting images of children, okay, in a sexualized context. It was like boys, and the kind of caption on it was about how hormones should be available to boys in high school and middle school. And so when I see things like this, I'm always kind of self-conscious of the fact that maybe, like this looks like it's illegal to me. Will I get in trouble because I've now seen this? So the first thing I'll try to do is get evidence of it and then report it. I'll report it to Twitter, but they do nothing. So I mean, this account had personally had like other iterations that had been suspended, but kept coming back up. So I reported it to Twitter. Nothing happened. I sometimes file reports with sexual exploitation services, things like that. Nothing ever seems to really happen from that either. But anyway, this account was kind of what led me down to see some of the racist content, which really centers around BDSM. So, like I was explaining previously, a lot of this is centered around the fetishization of oppression, specifically things like humiliation, which are found in BDSM. So the masochistic element, of wanting to be made inferior or made less or something like this. So when you apply that in the context of the racism in it, what ends up happening is, the hyper masculinized racist idea of a Black man, and then combined with the sexist, misogynist idea of girlhood or womanhood. All right. So a man, a sissified man, um, put into this context of as though a woman or a girl with a Black man. And, things sort of like to that extent of, they're more masculine, so we need to serve them. And they'll use that kind of language too, like slave and master and things like that. It's really, really dark and it's really ugly. I do not recommend anyone to look at it. Now that I know the hashtags, I don't even feel comfortable like repeating some of them just in case. But it's there. It's out there. It's all over Twitter. I mean, it's probably all over Reddit too. I haven't really looked at that yet because, like I said, I need to distance myself from it, from time to time. It's pretty ugly stuff, but I see people kind of criticizing pornography in general now more and more, which is a good thing. People criticize racism in mainstream pornography or criticize violence in mainstream pornography, and yet all of these things exist in transgender pornography as well. I mean, I hate, I was going to say maybe worse, but I don't know. Maybe it's the same, I guess. Maybe it's on the same level, but it's there too. And yet it seems to kind of get washed over or not discussed or some kind of pass. I'm not sure. Maybe people don't know. Maybe they're not aware. But recently, I don't know if you saw this, Isabella, there were some accounts on Twitter where men were dressing up in niqab, not the full hijab, but like the niqab, I think it's called. Um, and these were like sissy men who were fetishizing the idea of being a Muslim woman.
Oh my
Um,
God.
yeah, it was really awful. I've seen several of them now. Again, if you see one on Twitter, you can just easily go to their followers. You can just see loads of kind of similar things. If that's, I mean, well, I do that because I'm trying to keep track of this stuff. I don't think you would want to do it necessarily, but because I'm actively looking at these kinds of things. And there was another one on a Reddit forum that had posted this, and with an image of himself, a selfie, and then this description that was just the most awful things, like, I want to be made into a housewife. I want to be made to serve my master. I want to be forced to be a helpless Muslim woman. I mean, just really again, it's all centered around the humiliation inherent that they believe is inherent to being a woman.
Wow.
There's a reason why the anti-Pornhub campaign is doing so well, and that's because over 2 million people signed the petition now. So there is a growing movement, even though maybe it's not centered around certain
Mhm.
organizations. I mean, there are organizations, but I mean, there's a sort of undercurrent of people who are very, very upset with what's going on with pornography. So I don't think it's really kind of reached its full stride yet. I think maybe, hopefully, it will soon with all of the scandal around Pornhub. But
Right.
I do think it is there, and I think it is growing, and people are kind of starting to talk more about it. I don't see that really quite happening with the transgender stuff yet. Again, it always just seems to be this topic that escapes any kind of criticism. It's like Teflon, but I don't know, like, why why is it okay for this to be going on for like transgender stuff, but you know, not okay if it's in the other or mainstream context or whatever, you know.
I thinking, on the topic of like trending and just the pervasiveness of the material out there, I was contacted by a trans-identified man in his early 20s who told me that he's a prostitute and that when he started prostituting himself when he was, I think, 13, like dressing up like a girl. So at that point, I imagine it was just more just like cross dressing or what we used to consider a transsexual without any kind of surgery. He said he would make, like nothing. Now to sleep with an hour with a married man, he makes $500. So he said he went from making $40 to $500 just in the past few years, past 6 years. This guy's like 20 now.
Hmm.
So why would that demand be higher? Because it's in porn.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it doesn't feel like a huge mystery.
I think a
Um,
couple of things are happening, and there's this thing called the Coolidge effect, which maybe most people would understand what it is without knowing the term. But it's basically that the more you watch pornography, the more desensitized you become to it. So you need ever increasing taboos to elicit sort of the same thrill, kind of like chasing the dragon or something like this, right? So, I mean, what could be more novel, more taboo than, mixing the sex, right? So like the female looking breasts and face or what have you, and then the male genitalia. I mean, it's not realistic. It doesn't occur naturally in nature. I mean, most of the men who watch transgender porn self report themselves to be heterosexual. I mean, we can ask questions about that certainly, but anyway, that's the case, that they believe themselves to be heterosexual. So I think that the desensitization and then escalation.
Mm.
And so there's this huge demand for it now. And also, another thing to consider is that the male sex drive is there. So men who might, pretend to be women or get certain surgeries to resemble women would be far more likely or possibly willing to do things that women wouldn't perhaps want to do. I've actually seen porn accounts talk about this as well. It's like having a woman, but with the sex drive of a man. So, um,
Wow.
and recently I've seen some videos on Pornhub of men going into women's spaces and filming themselves for voyeur porn. A one I saw recently with the name of Jenna, he went into a high school at night and was filming himself in the girls' restroom of the high school with various devices that he was masturbating himself with. And this is illegal in the first place. It's trespassing. It's public exposure. I mean, it's a crime. But there are other videos like this as well. I saw one of a man in a changing room at Forever 21. There's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're being they're getting this motivation to go out in public now and to go into women's spaces, and then breaking that boundary is part of what's the thrill for, not only for themselves but for the viewers.
Right.
Sorry, it was kind of heavy stuff.
No, I'm just like, it's just seeping in. I am actually was thinking about the number of trans identified men who I've seen around where I live, as like servers, just like baristas, waiters, stuff like that. And I'm surprised that I haven't seen them in the bathroom yet. And that in like the real world, it's fucking scary. Like, I think it's already so much for a woman to follow my account or any like, radical feminist account. It's already like brave to like or share or comment. And then like that, so you get past that step of being like, okay, like I'm going to be visible like in the digital realm, but like, yeah, in person, it's a whole nother thing. I don't think I told you this story. I was at a comedy club a few months ago and just dying to pee at the end. It was just like a 3-hour show, and I'm like running to the bathroom. And I immediately see on the door it says, gender neutral or / whatever. They try to be like funny about it. Like, we're so cool that we don't care about your genitalia. So I open the door and there are men standing at urinals. And so I like close the door, just like intuitive, like just instinctively. I'm just like, oh my God, no. And I just, and I like run away and I go to the other bathroom and there are men there, but they're not standing at urinals. And I'm in this like panic mode, like, what the fuck? Like, my bladder is about to burst. So I run into a stall to pee and the lock on the stall door is broken. So, this happened, this like always, this is a thing that like a lot of women have experienced in public bathrooms, or, bathrooms of, private, businesses. And you just kind of put your foot on the door, you like hang your bag. So it like creates weight. So the door stays closed, like we all have our tricks of like what to do. But I was like, but there are like men, there's like a man next to me, to my right and to my left and washing his hands and blah, blah, blah. So I just stuck my foot out to keep it closed and peed and got out of there as quickly as possible. And I like emerged from the bathroom and I just was like, I just kind of screamed. I was like, who works here? Who works here? And I actually I like looked at a guy who had been on stage, who had been like more of an MC, and I didn't realize he was also a comedian. And I was like, do you work here? And he was like extremely offended. He was like, I'm a comedian. And so then someone came up to me, and he looked really, really nervous because I was fuming. And he just said, you're not, I just went off. I was like, this is completely unacceptable, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, you're not the first woman to say something. And gave me some like, I'll talk to them, blah, 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 whatever. And then my friend pulled me away because I think she thought we were going to get kicked out of the venue. Also, that one of the comedians during that set is an autogynephile. And the butt of his jokes were all about having access to the women's bathroom. He made it so one of his jokes was basically he was saying how he doesn't get kicked out of bathrooms for being a man. He gets kicked out of bathrooms for doing coke.
Ha ha ha.
Yep. So it was quite a night. But yeah, that's the I think the first experience I've had this year of that, just real time. Like, this is it. It's happening. It's not just stories. It's not just like birth world stuff. This isn't ideology anymore. Like, this is real time shit that's happening, and causing like the nervous systems of women all over the world to go into overdrive. Like the sensation of like having just a really, really full bladder and like literally like not having a choice other than like running outside and squatting, you know. And it's like, if you take the man's example, like if a man feels uncomfortable in a bathroom for whatever reason, like he could literally just go outside and like whip out his penis and pee, and like no one thinks twice.
Thank you. Yes, I have been saying this for years, actually. It's not so that they would always say like they just want to pee, but it's women who just want to pee. Like, I don't know a single woman, or maybe even men that I know, who haven't seen a man piss in public. We all know. I mean, even since I was a child, like I remember like boys writing their name in the snow and things like this. It's not like the reason we have these spaces is because women just want to pee in peace. Men, they go in public. We know this. I mean, and then and have this kind of ideology spreading across to other countries where women don't even have toilets yet, like the nightmare that's going to ensue once it fully takes hold in places like India. It's just going to be awful. And it's a completely first world kind of academic, unrealistic kind of way of seeing the world. And the repercussions are very, very real.
Yeah.
The We Spa thing, it's like people
Mm.
are not going to be able to pretend like this isn't happening anymore. I was really glad for that. Of course, they are trying to pretend like it was made up, as they will do. But as more and more of these things start to come to light, and there will be very soon, I think, hopefully that will push the conversation to a point where we can't ignore the reality of what's going on anymore. I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I'm glad that you said something. I wonder if they'll
It's
actually do anything about it.
I doubt it. I doubt it. All of their headliners are like Hollywood, PC. Like all the jokes were very predictable in terms of the like what paradigm they're in, which includes believing that trans women are women. Yeah. I mean, it was surprising and unsurprising. It's like, wow, like I can't even like enjoy entertainment. I mean, like as if comedy isn't already ripe with misogyny. Like This
Right.
is just a cherry on top. It's already hard for me to like enjoy comedy because of the rampant misogyny, but from both male and female comedians. But there was one thing I want to note that people have maybe already have experienced is that when they create these gender neutral whatever bathrooms, they're just taking what was formerly the men's bathroom and formerly the women's bathroom and slapping a sign outdoor. They're not putting urinals in both areas. So what happens is that the men retain their space, right? Because and I think my experience is really emblematic of that, because intuitively, I just thought I had done something wrong. It's like I don't go to the place where urinals are because I don't have a penis.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had that response, other women had that response, have that response, as evidenced by the reaction of the guy that I spoke to who worked at the venue. So the men end up getting their space and the women are forced to share with men.
Mm-hmm. That's been the case too. In some places, there were like some photos, like a thread of it on Twitter about um, photographs of where it was like men and then gender neutral. So it's like
Right.
there's the men's toilet and then there's everybody's toilet.
Right. And there were, I will say that the men I came across in the what was formerly the women's bathroom looked really uncomfortable. Like their heads were down, like they weren't making eye, like when I say they, I mean like the two that I came across when I was in there, they were looking down. I don't think non-gonophilic men want this unless they are predators, like the average Joe, I don't think wants it.
No.
That doesn't mean he's going to do something to stop it, but they looked visibly uncomfortable. Like they were like trying to get out of my way. Again, that's just two.
But of course, again, it's always like the fact that women are being used as shields for male violence when we're actually far more susceptible and vulnerable to it.
Right. Right. You know, I did this 6-week program with Ruth Barrett where we talk about, for those who don't know Ruth Barrett, she's an amazing feminist. She produced the anthology Female Erasure. Um we got into the power of mirrors, the power of seeing our reflection, the power of speaking to our reflection, and how that's been totally um, been made into something that is considered vain. Right, even you think of the term vanity, right, that there isn't value and actually it takes away from your value, or um, is an expression of some kind of selfishness to look at yourself in the mirror. And so like I think about the communal experience of being in a bathroom with other women, looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at your friends in the mirror, and like the sanctity of that experience. And she goes into like what that means in terms of like a goddess worship, like seeing your reflection in the goddess. And yeah, I just, it's just like dawning on me now that there's like I would call it like a spiritual attack, not just like on on a physical level of actually women's safety, like physical safety being in jeopardy, but the destruction of that like really sacred communal experience of just looking at each other in the mirror and seeing a man there
Mm-hmm.
trying to impersonate the goddess. You are the goddess. we are the goddesses. We're all like, you
Right.
know, the goddess within. It's just so what a violation.
Mm.
Like what disrespect. Like if women aren't in a place of recognition of how powerful that experience like can be and is, and like this is the problem that like, you know, talked about in other episodes, like if a woman has not experienced, I interviewed Emily Saldé about this, you know, and she said that if a woman hasn't experienced the sanctity of a women only space, like how could you possibly convey the value of that to her if she has never experienced that in her lifetime, if she's never been on like a women's retreat, or, you know, been only with women for 4 days, not a single man in sight. Like if one has not experienced the power of women only spaces, then how can you convince them to preserve them? And so without knowing the sacredness of that experience, something as seemingly um trivial as just washing your hands next to another woman, you know, there's a reason why women want to go to the bathroom together. It's a woman only space. It's a space where you can speak openly and vulnerably and also protect one another, right? Should there be an intruder, like there's a buddy system that happens with you know, going to the bathroom that I think is really important. But yeah, that experience of whether it's like cleaning yourself together or adorning yourself together, whatever it is, it's just another level of, yeah, just violation that's just kind of dawning on me.
Yeah. So I used to live in Korea, and the sauna culture there, you know, the We Spa was a Korean spa, but the it's called Jimjobong, and you know, you're completely naked in the water area. Then there's also usually like a co-ed area where they give you clothing for, and you go into like the actual like dry saunas there. And so in the bath area, you know, it's just, I remember the first time like seeing this and just kind of like, wow, you know, I mean, because it was like you could see realistic women's bodies, not the things that you see on TV, not the things you see in magazines, not these airbrushed, like fake representations of women, but actual women. And there's like no fear. There's just such an absolute freedom that comes from being like fully vulnerable around other women that you can't really get in many other aspects. So,
Mm-hmm.
so and then add to that, you know, women who don't even know each other, like scrubbing each other, helping each other like this, right? So like women might maybe come up to me and like do a salt scrub on my back, you know, and like scrub each other's backs and things like this. And it's just kindness, and you just feel very safe. I did have an experience in one of these places where I went to the co-ed area, and I'm in the dry sauna, and then a man in there um, began to masturbate himself while I was in there. And it's like, you know, you go from this women only space where you just feel very comfortable. You go in, and then you're in the co-ed area, and granted, you know, you are wearing clothing. It's not nude, but yeah, just the contrast, you know.
What did you
When you
do?
have when you have that kind of experience, you always kind of like, maybe you think like, oh, I would do this because I'm strong or something. I don't know, but like I just kind of froze because I didn't know what to do. I was kind of thinking about what I should do and couldn't really decide. So I think after a few minutes, I just kind of got up and walked out because I didn't really just want to deal with it, you know? Like I didn't want to confront him. And then I think
Yeah.
like in retrospect, I might have done something different, but at the time, you know, if you're not mentally like prepared for something like that, you just kind of like, and you know, in general, people don't want to have a conflict. People try to avoid conflict. I mean, that's why I think was so brave about the We Spa video, because most people would just probably kind of feel like, oh, I I don't want this to be a big deal. Like, I just want this to go away. I just want to be safe. But she confronted them and started a national conversation about it. And so people will try to pretend like it didn't happen. But, you know, we have that video. We have other women starting to speak up and tell their stories as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It is really scary. I think I'm like, why? I'm like, why did I say something at the comedy club? And I think it's because I had a drink. I honestly think that is because I had like, I drank alcohol
yeah.
and I had some liquid confidence, and it was like it was an outer body experience. I mean, it was like, it wasn't I didn't think twice. It was like I was vomiting. Like I couldn't control it. I just like literally busted out of the bathroom and was like, who works here? But I don't know what I would have done had I not had an alcoholic beverage, and I would not recommend everybody drink to stand up for themselves and for women. That is not what I'm suggesting. But yeah, I mean, there will be plenty of other times where I totally freeze up and don't know what to say, I'm sure, because the frequency of this happening is just going to get, more intense.
I find it
Yeah.
really interesting that this is all happening at the same time that, you know, everybody has a camera in their hands. You know, there's like millions and millions of people walking around with cameras in their hands, and voyeur porn is just escalating. You know, we can look at Korea as an example of that with the spy cam porn things. You know, like even we will never know how many women have already been violated by this because they're not even aware of it themselves. You know, recently a woman in China found her face put onto pornography in what's called deep fake porn.
Oh, I know about
So
the deep fake
somebody,
porn.
yeah, so somebody sent her this and was like, hey, what's going on here? Why is your face on this porn? And so she is working to develop an app that would help women to like track their face across um, the internet, which is just horrifying that we have to
God.
think about these kinds of things. Anyway, that we would have to come up with solutions, you know, and also it's like the problem is already happening, you know? So we're having to come up with solutions that are like defensive because we're not having anything that's like going on the offensive to prevent this from happening. And I just find it so coincidental that men are trying to get into women's private spaces at the same time that this is going on. And I have seen there were rings that were busted in Korea where men were making thousands of dollars a month from streaming content within hotel rooms, bathrooms. So it's not simply just, you know, one's own personal sexual gratification. There is a lot of money that can be made from doing this. And so now we're saying that, you know, like women have to share their spaces with men. And if you say anything, you're a bigot. And well, there's this huge financial interest to stream pornography of women without their knowledge.
The deep fake porn is so freaking scary. When I
It's,
think about the possibility of that happening, like I just I get into like a nihilistic kind of mindset for like survival, and I'm just like, nothing matters. Nothing matters. Nothing matters. Like I start to like dissociate when I think about stuff like that just to survive. Yeah, because it's so beyond. It's so beyond. And like I'm not on Twitter. I mean, I am on Twitter, but I don't use Twitter. The little that people have engaged with me on Twitter has been like enough to scare me away, to be honest. And like my main platform is Instagram. That's like my home. It's very sad to say that. That is my digital. That is my preference for the digital sphere.
well,
But
Instagram is very media heavy, right? Whereas on Twitter, you can kind of hide your face, but on
yes,
Instagram,
Yeah. There's like, this is what I like about Instagram. You have more opportunity to humanize yourself. I feel like it's the most humanizing of social media platforms. I would say more so than TikTok, more so than Snapchat, more so than Facebook, more so than even YouTube. YouTube is more about like production, and there's something really like diary and like entry vibes about Instagram, and with such an emphasis on our like digital avatars, it's easy to forget that like there's so much work to be done on like the physical plane. And again, like I think your forte, my forte is like consciousness racing, right? You're researching, you're archiving, you're speaking about these things, you're documenting everything. And then there's the direct action that, organizations like Save Women's Sports and WHRC and Wolf are doing like on the ground. But the deep fake porn shit, it's like, it's horrible. It's horrible. If that happens to anyone, it's totally disgusting. And it doesn't exist on the physical plane. Like it's all made up shit that has real world consequences, of course. But yeah, I have to go to a nihilistic point to fathom how like one would heal from that kind of experience, that kind of exploitation, which is distinct from actual rape, which is
Yeah.
distinct from actual physical assault.
It's so unique in its terrorism because it forces your own dissociation at the same time that it's abusing you, and you feel, or I imagine that if it were to happen, you would probably feel like, how can I be this upset when no one ever laid a hand on me? Do you know? It's like rape, but you haven't been touched. It's so creepy. It's so disturbing. In Japan, there was a case where this had happened to two women, and they were celebrities. So for now, mostly it's been celebrities, people who are in the public light who are victims. But I mean, increasingly, it's starting to kind of spread its little tentacles out to other people as well. But so because they were in the public eye, their PR or their entertainment company said this is a violation of them because it violates their ability to make money. It's their reputation. Then the porn company, right? So with deepfake, if people don't know, it's like the face of the person and then mashed up with actual pornography. So then the porn company said this violates our copyright on the images of these women's bodies. So both of the companies claim to litigation was based on owning the image of a woman, whether it was her face to make money for the company or her body to make money for the porn company. And so in neither case was it recognized that this was a violation of the women. And it had to be brought to court in this way of copyright, which I just find so distressing.
Wow.
Like that's not a road that we should be going down. If we go down that road further, it's just going to result in more of what's already happening, which is women becoming the intellectual property of men, like full ownership, like body, soul, mind. That's already going on and is going on now with transgenderism as well.
Wow.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe this app, the Chinese woman, maybe that would be a good start. It's certainly one of the first actual, what should I say, like going on the offensive kind of action, like that I've seen. Um, so hopefully there'll be more of that soon. I just, there is the AI capability for tracking this. I mean, there's an organization, what are they called now? Sensity. Sensity does research on this. And, in their research, they found that, 98% of the victims were female, of course. But there is AI to kind of track this and figure out, how to prosecute these people. I'm, again, with so many of the issues that relate to women, I'm just wondering when that's going to start happening. When are we going to enforce punishment of this behavior? But the laws are not even caught up yet. In some cases, they're still in different countries that the laws are moving at different rates, but it's not even technically a crime in some places of the world yet. So we really got to figure out how to make the laws get up to speed with the technology. I'm kind of afraid that, that in itself is a much bigger problem as well. Not only deepfakes, but the fact that technology is accelerating at a rate that's really exceeding our ability to track it or to fully contain some of the dangers involved.
Really shows where the priorities are.
Right. Well, so much of technology has been created explicitly for the exploitation of women. I mean, VHS was for porn, filming porn. What else? I mean, even streaming technology. So if you think of things like Netflix, where you stream programs, like that technology was born out of pornography.
Did you have you read Nancy Joe's book on the
Mm-mm.
dating apps? So Megan had her on the same drugs, and she talked about basically how fucked up dating apps are. And she went into what research shows is that men who use these apps are typically oscillating between porn and dating apps. Like they're going back and forth. So like what's better, and like the surge of like, asking for nudes. Like what's better than seeing like a naked woman you don't know, seeing a naked woman who's giving you attention, like seeing a photo or a video of a naked woman who you're like speaking to. And how like these apps were designed by men, made for men, right? And so like they're hookup apps, like that's what they were designed to. But the false marketing is that you're going to find love and a relationship and all this stuff. But I had never thought about men not just oscillating between watching porn and be on the app, but actually watching porn while they're on the apps, like while they're swiping,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the culture of just like consumption translates really well to like the swipe feature, like yes, no, like just like changing the channel,
Mm-hmm.
or like clicking next video, next video, next video. Anyway, it's a bit
Yeah.
of a tangent, but I was wondering if you had, read her book, because she talks a lot about pornography.
No, I haven't. Unfortunately, because of what I'm doing at the moment, I'm just kind of like one track,
Yeah.
like I'm not even watching that much TV, to be honest, which is nice. I would recommend taking a break from television, movies, all of that stuff. It's really kind of refreshing to kind of just be in yourself. But no, I haven't even been reading that much. I've just been kind of like on this like go, trying to write and sort of toying with the idea of like writing a book about all of this kind of stuff, because I just, like I said, I never seem to find a bottom to it. Like just keeps going and going, like the whole the Scoptic syndrome thing that I talked about last time with you, that I just kind of went down my own rabbit hole in my brain about, the religious aspect of all of this. And by all of this, I mean, the claim to a gender identity. It just has such really strong parallels with religion. And I'm kind of wondering if, if there's a way to kind of frame it that I think pornography is becoming like a religion. It's in this increasingly fractured society and the world where people are sort of going off into their own tribes. What's the unifying cultural signifier, and it's pornography, or it seems to be. You know, in the past, religions more or less were a way of uniting a culture, you know, and at some point, almost anyone who could read had read the Bible. So you would have, and of course, I mean, in Europe, it's different across the world, obviously, but you would have a common culture. You would have at least something that you knew that you could talk about with someone else, right? And I kind of feel like this media consumption, you know, everyone has these different choices of what to watch, what news to look at. And what's the unifying culture? Well, objectifying women. Everyone does that, right? So it has such a religious aspect to it that I really want to kind of explore more. Of course, I'm horrified by the idea of it, but what does that say if in society the thing that most people have in common, most men have in common, is that they've watched pornography? You know, it's, I don't really know where to go from there, but hopefully a bigger conversation will be had about this, and the actual impact of streaming pornography that's starting to be present in children. Things, for example, like in the UK, where schoolgirls are being asked to send nudes by their classmates. We're talking 13 years old, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls being solicited for naked photos by their male classmates, and worse things than that, you know? So I do think a lot of parents are starting to get knowledgeable about what's going on, and hopefully there will be some kind of reckoning before it's too late.
I'm so excited for your book.
Well, I guess I shouldn't have said anything. Easier said than done, right? I would
mean,
like to.
It's like the most practical solution to what you're doing, and it puts it in the physical form. Like your work doesn't exist in the physical form right now, right?
Right, right. And
Like
there's always that threat of having, you know, everything pulled down or whatever. So at least if it was a book, then I wouldn't have that hanging over. But
I mean, I like back up my stuff, but like digitally. Like I haven't like printed out every Instagram post that I've made over the past 5 years. Like it doesn't exist in a photo album. It just exists as a folder on a hard drive. You know, it's like all these backup systems like BitChute, Odyssey. It's like, I don't know. I think we need to, consider that they can pluck us from the internet at any point in time. And the idea of having like a physical book feels really like gratifying and like secure, because once you distribute in the physical form, like it's out there. Like sure, they could burn the warehouse down, but like once they're mailed out, and they, it's like each have a life of their own. I think
I kind of want to go back to what you were saying earlier about like the image, though, because I had been thinking about this a lot too. Like I mentioned with the copywriting of women's, whatever you want to call it, image, bodies, all of this. And it strikes me that with the male identified as female, kind of to add what you were saying before, it puts a man between a woman and her own self. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but the way that I think of it kind of, you know, metaphorically, it's that before a woman can speak of herself or think of herself, she must then consider the male. I mean, even the word cis, right? This is a kind of conditioning. This is a way of putting the male into your brain before you even talk about yourself, right? It's like, I'm considering his feelings before I speak about myself. It's very self-censoring and self-restricting, but within that, the other aspect being that you cannot even think of yourself as a woman, right? That's taken because he's taking womanhood. So now it's not really yourself anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's the projected image, the male defined image of woman is now what you're meant to associate with woman, not like the natural woman, but the constructed plastic male version.
Yeah, absolutely. That resonates. It's a kind of, I mean, it's a mind control. It's a mind control, it's a body control to like you know, yeah, it just reminds me of, you know, women who are in relationships with men who like constantly put the needs of their male partner before their own. Like, what do I want? Oh, no, 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 no. What does he want? And then does it match what I want? Or like, how can I adjust myself to fit his needs? You know, like just that, like that interception, like the cis is that interception. It's characteristic of an abusive relationship.
Well, and it forces women to dissociate themselves from their own bodies. And that's been used historically, that tactic has been used to exploit women's bodies, right? So
Right.
it comes to this idea of that, you know, like splitting first and then exploiting, right? And dissociation is a trauma response. Women who have been sex trafficked, for example, often would report, you know, dissociating, women who have been sexually abused and so on. And so the damage of the word cis, of this male image between a woman and knowing herself, is trauma inducing, and that it fractures, you know, the psyche. It fractures an ability to know oneself, or even to just recognize fundamental truth, to believe what's in front of you, to name reality. You know, there's so many elements to it, but it does induce dissociation, you know, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of plastic versions of men, I wanted to pull up the Sports Illustrated cover. Oh,
I
Lena
hadn't
Bloom.
noticed I hadn't noticed before at the top where it says opening eyes, speaking truths, changing minds. Like, when did Sports Illustrated become philosophical?
Oh my God. Truth tellers. There's nothing truthful about this other than the just shamelessness of the pharmaceutical and cosmetic surgery industries. I mean, this image would be better suited to sell very, very high level medical technology.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to give them credit. Like, they did a really good job of making this man look like soft and voluptuous and like conventionally attractive. Like, they did an excellent job. So, like, this image alone doesn't trouble me. What troubles me is that this is not explicitly an ad for the pharmaceutical industry. This is a feat of technology. Like, this is high level cosmetic surgery capability.
Right. Well, I mean, and also what it does is it reduces women to pornography, right? So if like the definition of a woman is, or let's just say like womanhood is attainable by going through certain things, right? So you can attain womanhood by purchasing breast implants, right? Then you're essentially saying that womanhood is for sale, that womanhood itself is a product and nothing more than a pornified uh, fabrication of men's projected objectification. I mean, and that's what this says to me. This says that see womanhood is easy, anyone can do it, I can buy breasts, and then now I'm a woman too, because that's all that you are, is a pair of breasts or whatever. So, I mean, it's just, of course, it's very insulting. It's, I mean, it is insulting when women are objectified in this way anyway, but there's something more, I don't know, there's just something more about a man doing it too, that it just, I can't quite put a word to, but it just feels very insulting,
Yeah.
mocking.
I think you've said it in like previous in some of our previous episodes where man becomes a better version of woman. Like men now can become better women than women.
Right, because women are just this idea, this sexy
Right.
idea. And so,
Right. If the idea is like the biggest boobs, the smoothest skin, the fullest lips, the most like beachy sex hair, then like, look, they can do it too.
mhm.
Except they can't. Like they need hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical assistance and technology to make it so. You know what wouldn't be an attractive Sports Illustrated cover is like the post-op photos of this man.
Mm-hmm.
Just the gruesome, brutal reality of what the process looks like to become this synthetic version of a human male.
Right.
It's just, it's next level.
We talked about this before, but you know, I'm always kind of reminded or struck by the reminder of the history of the cosmetic surgery industry anyway, that, you know, women were experimented on, still are experimented on, and die, um, so that men can have access to this kind of technology, so that they can become their own form of sexual fetishization, whatever. I mean, even recently, they found that breast implants were causing a new form of breast cancer. So there's been so many lawsuits about this right now that's going on. And it's
Right.
just, it's again, it's almost like it's this background noise that, you know, oh, it doesn't really matter that much. You know, thousands of women in debilitating pain and developing cancer. And at
Yeah.
the same time, you have this tide of men asking for money for breast implants. So yeah, when I look at that, I'm just, you know, struck by um, the gross insult to women's bodies, to women's health. Um, Nothing else really seems to matter except what men perceive us to be or want us to be. This
Right.
this this is intentionally, I think, trying to guide women back to their prescribed role. And I think, I mean, you know, we could question that. We call it into question whether it's intentional or just a result of the way that society is going and trends and money and all those things. But I really, from the things that I've seen, it really feels quite deliberate to me, especially the things that I've seen in the pornography.
Yeah. Yeah. Going back to what you were talking about earlier with you know, being in the Korean spas and just seeing women's bodies of all shapes and sizes, and what like an integral part of growing up like that, that's really really important for young women to see what real women's bodies look like. Yes, real women, actual adult human females. um and to think that like children are looking at this image, it would be bad enough if it's like a like an actual woman on this. We've like, it was already a problem that Sports Illustrated was like sexualizing actual women constantly with these like misogynistic beauty standards, but now just the disservice and the self-hate that it breeds. But that's precisely the point. The point is for women to hate themselves more and more, to seek out products, fashion, makeup, surgery, to try to achieve this completely synthetic look and identity. It's so crazy. It's like we're making strides, like talking about body hair and how body hair is normal and natural, and then bam, trans-identified males everywhere.
Right.
It's like,
Just as women are like talking about loving their own bodies, then this comes along. It's very coincidental. I mean, I think Gail Dines said, you know, if women woke up today and decided to love their bodies, imagine how many industries would go out of business. And I think that's true. I think I have kind of wondered before and sort of did some of the math about industries that exploit women. And it seems to me that without the exploitation of women, global economies would crash and burn. I mean, the world's economic system depends on women hating themselves to an extent. So, I mean, this all kind of feels a bit like a desperate and angry attempt to reel women back in. But women won't wished.
oh yeah.
Did you see that?
Yes. I love it. For those who are listening to you for the first time, where can women support your work and read your writing and your research?
So I'm on Twitter at Women Read Women, and I have a Substack, which is myname.substack.com, GenevieveGluck.substack.com. I have a podcast, which I'm always like, I'm always forgetting to mention because I don't know why, but yes, I have a podcast. I just feel weird saying the words I have a podcast. I feel kind of like a jerk, but anyway, it's interviews and sometimes news commentary things, and it's called Women's Voices. So yeah, you can find that too.
It's the least jerky podcast that's ever existed. It's incredibly humble and important. Humble in its delivery, fierce in its content. Actually, I think that could be your tagline, Genevieve.
That's a great tagline.
Humble in delivery, fierce in content.
Yeah, but if you say that you're humble, people are kind of like, well,
I can do it for you. I can write the intro to your book. She is humble in delivery and fierce in her content. It's true. But now I'm thinking, what should we talk about next time? Oh my gosh, I'm sure there'll be plenty more ridiculousness happenings from now till the next time.
It's never ending.
It is never ending. Thank you again, Genevieve. And I will link your podcast and all your other amazing offerings in the show notes.
Thank you.